Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome back. All right. So where we were in the middle of discussion of class one is that we're really looking at how do we understand what somebody says to us, like a Buddha, for example, right? When we hear certain words, right, instructions or ideas or presentations of emptiness, what's the what do they really mean by the words that they say? And what we're studying in this course, and this is why this is course 15 of 15, right? Yes, there's review courses, and you guys are going to love and hate how we're going to do ACI 16, 17, and 18. All right. And I've designed a way for us to be able to, for those of you who have not done your homework yet, and I can see who has and who hasn't, right? Yeah, half of you are like, oh shit. Um, you know, I have designed a way that I think is going to be an actual review. It's going to give us a way to really go through all the material and give you an opportunity, if you haven't done it yet, you know, and, different teachers have different styles. And then you got to understand if I'm being figurative or literal right now, you know, but some teachers don't let you come to the next class until you have the homework done. Ken's like, what? you know, some teachers actually take the first 5 minutes and have everyone does the quiz, right? And I think those are, and then there's other teachers like myself that I might remind you gently, just like I might remind you, wow, it'd be really nice to see all of your faces. Like, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a camera on? And like, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful, like, if Tim knew who I was? Or how wonderful it'd be if Tim could figure it out from my side? You know, I'm not, I might whine about things but I also believe in people's process of learning, and different people need different things. Now, if you need a teacher who's going to force you to do the homeworks and the quizzes like right away, or you can't even come to the class, great. Maybe that's the teacher for you, right? But maybe you wouldn't enjoy it as much, or maybe, some people really like it that way. So it's different styles, different strokes, different peoples, right? But, and there's comes a time when we have to be a little more formal, right? There comes a time when we have to be a little bit more to ensure that learning has happened, right? And so in the Tibetan system, reviewing everything 3 times is highly important, if not reviewing it 10 times. Someone came to me, I don't know, 6 months ago and was like, Tim, I finished the 18 courses. And I was like, yeah, awesome. And they were like, what should I do now? And I was like, do them again. They're like, what? And I was like, yeah, do them again. You didn't understand it the first time. Like, well, and I don't mean you don't understand something. Get it? I didn't say you didn't understand everything. I said you didn't understand it, right? There's some things that weren't understood, because each time that you go through things, you get into a different layer, and you yourself are a different person. You're not the same person that you were if you started these classes 5 years ago, right? You were probably more wild, more prideful. you know, you had a great heart, and then you had to work on it, right? Then we all have that. We've all improved. We're all better people than we were 5 years ago, right? So now that you're a better person, what if you went back and reviewed ACI 1? How would it be? Like, would you hear it the same way? No, you wouldn't. Of course not. Um, so yeah, so we've designed a way to do a review, which we will announce shortly-ish, meaning we're still getting all the pieces together. I don't want to freak out everybody until it's completely designed. But moving on to Diamond Way, I'm really, am I being figurative or literal? I will not allow exceptions, meaning that the courses do have to be done. And there's a deep, deep reason for that, and it's not about like, well, I was talking to a friend yesterday. It's like, it's not about, that's not my learning style. I'm like, I know some people just don't do well with homeworks, right? Look, if you're smart enough, you literally can download the answer keys from the internet. Our platform doesn't give you the answer until you submit your answer, designed on purpose. That way, so you learn. But if you're smart enough, you can find those answer keys. So maybe your learning style isn't homeworks and quizzes and exams. Well, guess what? That's why the answer keys are published. Okay, for different learning styles. I don't care if you copy it, although I do care. Right? You're not learning if you're copying. But at the same time, it's like, I just want you to learn, right? Right. And I promise you there's a reason why. There's a deep, deep reason why. As you get deeper into your practice and certain things start to happen, then you can recognize, then you have it burned into your synapses. Like, oh, that's what they meant by that. That's what they meant by that particular idea or realization, right? And then you have the roadmap. Then oh, okay, I know this. I know what to do, right? When you get into subtler states of meditation, things start happening. And then you need to know what to do. And that comes from repetitive understanding, right? Because if you can't be in a subtle state of meditation and be like, oh my God, I got to ask my teacher a question now. Hold on, subtle state of meditation, while I get up and write an email to my teacher who won't respond for a month, if he ever responds at all. Right? You got all the instruction, now you have to do it. And so, if you want to move into Dalam, and I don't care if you took Dalam already with another teacher. Actually, I do care. Great, wonderful. That's great. But if you want to move into the advanced teachings, you'll have to do Dalam again, because we're going to do it differently, right? Because Dalam is about one's personal teacher's experience with their own teacher. When Dalam was taught, Geshe Michael taught it from the point of view of Ken Rinpoche. He gave a Lam Rim teaching based on his own teacher's living example. That's why I'm calling it Living Lam Rim. Duh, if you didn't figure it out. Like, how do you learn to live the teachings? Right. And so he gave a whole class on Ken Rinpoche's, life. I didn't meet Ken Rinpoche. So why would I give a class about living Lam Rim about a teacher that I never met? Right. That's not helpful for you. Right. So, and that's how a lineage goes. So if you want to go there, we're going to give you a way to finish all 15 courses, 18 courses, as a review. Right. And it's going to be different than the way it's been taught previously. Tim, what if I already did the courses? Do them again. Don't tell me I already did it. The quickest way to get an answer, do it again, is to tell me you did something. So now you have to understand something, right? Like, how do you interpret what I just said? Right? What does it mean to you? Like, what is it like? And that's the whole point of this course, is to understand how is it that when a teacher is speaking, that you can understand what their actual intention is. Right? What did they really mean? What did the Buddha really mean when he was speaking about emptiness in the first, second, and third turning of the wheels? Right. So, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. So we're finishing up class 1 right now. Is, at the end of it, you are the one that have to rely upon what's logical and what makes sense to you. And that's part of what the teachings are about give you the skills to empower you to determine, does the things that your teachers say make sense? Is it something that I should pay attention to? Should I pay attention to this? Is this accurate, or is this inaccurate? And is it inaccurate because it's wrong, or is it inaccurate because it's helping me? And your mind needs to start, asking these types of questions. Like, what if you see inconsistencies? Well, dude, the Buddha taught emptiness in millions of different ways, grouped into 3 turnings of the wheel. Well, which one is correct? Right? Which one? And why did he spend his time on it? If he's an enlightened being, why would he spend time on something that's not helpful? Then you got to ask the question, right? I've had people, someone call me this weekend, like having an emergency and going through like this whole long story, you know, and all they need was 5 minutes with their teacher to get clarity. And they've written like 6 emails, and all this stuff is happening, and like all these other things are happening. But if they had the real story, then the stuff wouldn't be happening. I listened and asked questions. But I then asked the question, I was like, well, why do you think your teacher's not responding to you? Like, well, the whole thing's going to fall apart if they don't internet. And I was like, maybe they want it to fall apart. Maybe they want you to fall apart. Maybe they want you to stop being so attached. I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm not their teacher, you know, but like maybe there's a bigger plan in place, and maybe the falling apart over here will open up a paradise over there faster for you. I don't know. And that comes from a depth of understanding of the teachings, right? To be able to make that determination. Because surely at this point, the teacher isn't going to tell you, right? They're not going to tell you the truth. They're not going to tell you the way it is, right? That's not what their job is. Their job is to empower you. They're going to give you all the things you need. And then, of course, if they don't give you what you need and you have a reaction to it, maybe they're helping you purify that. Oh, they don't pay enough attention to me. I don't get the meetings that I'm supposed to. They don't give me the guidance, right? A friend of mine called last night and, you know, we got into something really deep and, you know, they've felt unsupported all of their life. And so their teacher, they don't feel supported by their teacher. And so what they've done as a life mission is they're supporting other people karmically, but they're still not getting the support, and they're like, I've spent all this time and I'm still not seeing the result, you know. And I asked them a question and I said, look, the feeling that you have of not being supported is a ripening, correct? Yes. Is the opposite of feeling unsupported, meaning the opposite seed, supporting other people? And then there was this long pause. And then they realized that it wasn't about support. In a way, it was. But what they were actually feeling was that their emotions were being disregarded. And then they were like, oh my God, even though I support people, I disregard their emotions. I disregard how they feel about the support. Right. And so there was an insight that they had because they do support people, but they weren't supporting people in a way that maybe made them feel good. Right. And so they were able to shift, they were like, oh, now I know what to do. Right. So your teacher might keep poking you at a certain spot until you understand why they're poking it. Right. You see, but you have to think about, like, what are they doing? What are they really doing? I made the joke last class about, oh, to solve all your problems, Tim, you should become you should become a monk. And I was like, wow, that's the exact opposite. Until I recognized the way that I felt when I was told that was the problem. Not becoming a monk or not is irrelevant. Right. So you have to determine yourself, what are the tools, right? And there's three types that we call them. There's one way of doing it is called it's the three types of tests. It's a test of gold, right? And what's interesting, no, the poking never ends, Maria, because even if you reach nirvana and you're blissed out and everything's wonderful, the Buddha shows up and goes, not enough. Get off your ass and keep going. You still have obstacles to omniscience, right? But it feels good. Yeah, I don't give a shit. Good. Go feel good for the rest of eternity. But you still have more to do, you see. You know, and the poking doesn't feel good sometimes. Like, you have to be willing, to suck it up because there's things you can't see. Um, the My friend knows the abbot of Saramay Monastery, very powerful and popular teacher, and his translator is also his primary attendant, and she speaks like 5 languages. And My friend was talking to her after a class one day, and she was like, "Oh my God, he works me so hard. He's so nice to everybody else, but he's so mean to me." Right. And my friend was like, "Yep, the life of an attendant, the life of, you know, someone who wants to grow." So if you want to grow, you have to put yourself in the fire, right? You have to be like, "Yep, there's certain things I don't know." And you'll kick and scream and you'll be upset and you'll blah 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 blah. I got an email from my teacher. I'm telling you all these things so you understand that this is not an abnormal situation. Okay. You're not unique. First of all, if your teacher is mean to you or is poking you or not responding, the last thing you should feel is that I'm the only one. You're not the fucking only one. You're not suffering by yourself. You feel like it, right? I got an email from my teacher yesterday that was, it was scathing, right? And I had to like, because they were pointing something out. I'd gone to them to figure out a problem, and then they waited 2 weeks, and then they sent me an email to explain to me what I was doing to create that problem. Right? They were like, "Oh, did you realize that when you did this here, you actually were doing that same thing that you're complaining about all the time?" Okay, fine. Thank you. I'm gonna lick my wounds over here, right? Put some hydrogen peroxide on it and then move on. But you have to be able to evaluate it, because I was pissed. I read the email first and I was like, right. And then I walked away and I read it again. And that, because I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't get upset. Maybe that was a karmic reaction. So then I went back, and then all of a sudden the words were different the second time. You know, I'll chemicalize your experience. Someone called it wizardry yesterday. You know, become a wizard of your own experience. Like, change it, right? And then how do you evaluate what's going on? So there's three tests they call it the test of gold. Okay. You know, and so when someone hands you an ancient India, and actually they do it today because they did it to me, and I'll tell you about it in a second, is that when someone gives you gold and says, "This is gold," do you believe it's gold? If you go into a jewelry store and you're buying a ring and they say, "Oh, this is 18 karat gold, 24 karat gold," which you actually don't want 24 karat because it's too soft. But this is 18 karat gold. Okay. Do you believe them? Oh, this is a diamond, right? Like, is this a real diamond, or is this a diamond made in a lab, right? Like, there's a certain trust, right? But what I'm saying, in ancient India, it's like, there were not international standards to they put that trust in it. So then you have to do certain things to the gold just to test. Like, let me test it, right? And what they mean is there's three different ways: by fire, cutting, and a touchstone, right? So the first one about fire, like, you melt it. Like, does it melt like gold? You know, if it's just covered in a, gold leaf paint, right? Or a gold color paint, but it's titanium underneath, right? You know, aluminum, something relatively inexpensive, you know, then you're being ripped off, right? It's not real gold. It just looks like gold, right? The second test is like, you cut it, like you actually just you snip the gold, right? Because if you were to cut a ring and look inside, if it was, is it gold all the way through, or again, is it like gold color on the outside but aluminum on the inside? right? And then there's a third thing called a touchstone, right? And so like it's called an acid test, right? Like if you put gold on a certain, a certain type of material, then put acid on it, right? It'll, it'll just stay the way it is. But if it's not real gold, it'll start doing stuff like in this particular test, it'll be oxidized or it'll turn to a blue color or something like that, right? You know, so those three different tests refer to the things that you need to do when you're, when you're evaluating what's being said to you, right? So like the first test, like melting it, right, refers to, does the statement or whatever's being said contradict our own direct experience, right? Excuse me, this is for all three, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, I'm correct, my brain stopped. The first one is about, does it direct contradict our direct experience, right? If the gold melts in the fire, right, like it should, the things that they tell us should align with our direct experience. Okay. And these are not, and again, these are, you have to be very careful with these. It's not always 100% clear, and that's why you have to do the work. Secondly, cutting refers to your reasoning, like your logic, your deductions, right? Like by cutting it, like you're going inside the ring to see what's going on inside that gold, right? You're like using all of your faculties, your thoughts, your reasoning skills, your logic skills to say, does this make sense, right? And then thirdly, right, the touchstone, right, refers to an authority, right? Did you establish that the being who's saying it is an authority figure that you can trust, right? Like a touchstone, you can trust that when you put gold on it, it stays gold no matter what you do to it, right? Because you trust, like, that when it does this, it is true, and so this is when the bodhisattva's question comes up. The bodhisattva, samudgata, this is good. Tim's brain stopped. It's early. Paramata samudgata, right? When the bodhisattva, we'll call him the bodhisattva, shows up to ask the Buddha, the bodhisattva is like, yo, Buddha, something don't make sense. Something doesn't make sense to me. And so they were using their own deductive reasoning. They were like, look, in the first turning the wheel, you said this. In the second turning the wheel, you said this. That don't make no sense. Oh, holy Buddha. WTF. Translators. That means, put it in the chat. In English, WTF means, what the fuck? Okay. What the hell? Like, what, respectfully, Buddha, like, I don't get it. You see? So he was using his own logic to say something doesn't make sense. I need some clarity. And then the Buddha says, oh, okay, well, I'll give you that clarity. And we're going to start getting that clarity today. Right. And then, of course, then you have to evaluate, did the answer that I just get, was that true? Or is there something sideways? Is there something not quite ready, accurate, right? Um, so that's how that works. And I actually had an experience of this. I got a statue made in Nepal a Maitreya statue, and the base has gold on it. And thanks for the feedback. When the translation feedback. So when my friend picked it up, saw that the base was scratched and was like, wait, this is supposed to be gold. Right. And it turned out that it wasn't gold. Right. It was scratched. Right. And it went back and said, look, dude, we paid you a lot of money for this statue. Like, that's not gold. That's just gold colored paint. Right. And so it was very fascinating. This happened this weekend. I'm like, what? Why is this happening? Like, why is this happening this weekend when you're teaching it? Right. So the tests, get those into your brain. And I'm spending a lot of time on it, like, does this align with my direct perceptions? Right. Does this align with my logic, my deductions? Or is the person saying something, are they an authority? Right. Oh, I've established that you're the Buddha. Yes. Okay. So Buddha, why did you teach two different turnings of the wheel? Why did you teach emptiness differently? Oh, I'll tell you. And then boom, the mind only school shows up. You've already established that he's the Buddha. So you're going to believe what the Buddha says? See how nasty it gets, or subtle it gets. Okay. Because what's the point? The point is you need to realize certain things. You have to understand how the world is coming from you. And all the tools that we get are designed to break samsara, are designed to break our misunderstanding, the wrong of things coming this way. It's designed, it's the red pill, okay? The blue pill. I don't know. Which one is it? Which one gets you out of the matrix? Turning one, turning two, turning three. Which one? Careful. I don't know. Careful. Think about it. And that's what we're going to. Which one of the three turnings of the wheels gets you out? Which one can stop this? Seeing things the wrong way. Okay. And you got to think about it. And the whole thing about this is that some might be technically incorrect, but they help us to think clearly about emptiness and how the world and everything we perceive as a projection, right, is something that's coming from our past seeds. It's not coming this way, it's coming that way, right? So the answer is yes. Which one gets you out of the matrix? Yes. They all do. Tartu tekpachik. Okay. And that's what that really means. Are there many paths or one path? Right? You got to think about it. Chiktu, one or many. Things are neither one nor many. Right. And, in the last kind of, like, the sort of last sales pitch about this is you know, what's another reason why we would want to get out, right? Like, well, excuse me, what is another reason to study figurative or literal? I'm just going to show you my picture for the last thing, just second to last thing, just because it's helpful. Who is this? Who are they? Okay. Oh my God. Come on, history. Come on, you guys. This is Albert Einstein. And this guy is Isaac Newton. All right. This guy developed Newtonian physics. They tell the story of an apple fell out of a tree, landed on his head or something. And then he was like, oh, gravity. Right. Newtonian physics describe the physical world. Are Newtonian physics correct? When you're in sixth grade and you learn physics for the first time, or whatever old you are, is it correct? Well, it's sometimes correct on Earth, but the numbers don't always add up properly, right? It's an approximation. It works enough. It works enough in engineering most of the time, right? Buildings tend not to fall down, right? And then, you know, Einstein came along and was like, whoa, 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 actually, there's something else going on. And then further explain things, right? You don't learn Einsteinian physics until you learn Newtonian physics, right? Because it's a much more in-depth presentation. Is Einsteinian physics the truth? Or is maybe could there be someone after Einstein? And there have been, right? Right? Someone else can describe the world in a different way, in a more subtle way. And they have. You got to think about it. Like, no, it's not the final one. The ideas of 50 years ago are mostly antiquated. Like in 50, 100 years, people are going to be like, I can't believe people lived like that. Right. You know, you have to think about it. Like, and then the other aspect of it is our, when we're thinking this way, then you start looking at people in a different way. Right. Maybe if the Buddha was saying things figuratively, you know, just to be helpful to us, you know, maybe we need to be careful about the people around us as well and not judge them because maybe they're special beings who are trying to help us, right? Maybe they're doing something to help us along the path, right? Maybe like, you know, here's this little girl learning to ride a bike and her dad is helping her, right? She actually doesn't need the help, right? She's got her training wheels on. She doesn't need him pushing, right? But she doesn't know that, right? She thinks she needs that help, right? And if you think about it, like if the first time you rode a bike, your dad or your mom or, uncle or whatever was probably helping you, pushing you, right? and you thought that their hand was on that seat, right? Look, like that little boy thinks that his dad is holding onto the seat, but his dad has let go, right? And now he's riding on his own, right? And then what happens? You look back and you realize that dad is all the way over there, and then you fall over, right? Then you have your first bike accident, right? you know and then you get mad at dad. Dad, you let go of the bicycle. I can't do that, right? you know but was your dad helping you, or whomever? Like, it was my dad. I'm telling a story from my point of view, right? I remember exactly where I was in the backyard, right? I ran into a tree. Right. Kids are great. They just fall over and bounce and get back up. You see? So is your dad helping you in that moment? You get mad, you get upset, you cry, da, 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 right? But then look around you, like, who is helping you, right? Is someone who's irritating you actually helping you? Who are they? Are they just like a parent? Are they just like a Buddha? I don't know, right? Like, who's, because look, at the end of the day, are they a Buddha or are they not a Buddha? I don't know. Can't tell. But if you have a conception that they are helping you, even when they're most irritating you, why? Because guess what? That person who's irritating you isn't out there by themselves. Duh. They're You have seeds to see someone yelling at you. You have seeds for someone to not like you. You have seeds to get in. You have seeds to get a harsh email from your teacher that's actually designed to help you. Can you see it? Can you see it? Like, that's the whole point. Can you see how you're creating the world? And the more you start understanding how you're creating the world, and your conception changes, the faster that world changes. The more that you can become that wizard that changes something very fast as you change the seeds. All right, so our character, Paramata Samud. Jeez, Tim, get his name right if you're going to teach it. Paramata Samudgata. Dundam Yangdak Pak, right? The Bodhisattva goes up to Lord Buddha and is like, hey, he probably got on one knee, put his shawl over his shoulder, and got into a respectful position. It's always nice to ask questions respectfully. Do not come up to me in Peachtree Cafe and get on one knee and put a shawl over your shoulder and ask me a question. I will kick you out. Come back tomorrow. But that doesn't mean don't ask nicely, right? Some of it is cultural. How do you honor someone in your mind? So anyway, the Bodhisattva, chapter 7 of the chapter requested by the Bodhisattva, right? He goes up and he says, Lord Buddha, look, I don't get it. I'm really trying. I'm trying really hard. I've come to all your ACI classes. I've done all my homeworks. Like, I've done all the review groups. I've been nice to people. I've tried to understand, but I just can't understand, right? I can't understand. When you taught the first turning of the wheel, you said things exist by definition, right? The four Arya truths, right? The five heaps, right? The 12 categories, the 18 doors of sense, or 12 doors of sense in the 18 categories, something like that. Okay. You taught me all this stuff. You were like, look, all these things exist. And Buddha's probably like, mm-hmm. If your teacher ever goes, mm-hmm, you're already having a problem. Okay. Word from the wise, meaning words from my direct experience. Anytime your teacher goes like this, you're already we say hosed in English. You're already something's already wrong. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're gonna tell me how things are? Okay, tell me how things are. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. Um, and then the Bodhisattva says, and then you went to Vulture's Peak and you were on some acid trip, right? You were like standing up there and being like, nothing exists. Nothing exists by definition. There's no eyes, there's no nose, there's no ears, there's no tongue, there's no body. Like form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Like nothing exists by definition. Like you were out on some other planet, you know, probably, ate some wild mushrooms out there, and then we're hallucinating that nothing exists. This is Tim's dramatization, by the way, if Tim ever makes a movie about this, right? Oh, by the way, if you want a really, really good depiction of what it's like to be a student with a teacher, there's a show called The Chosen, and it's about Jesus's disciples. Okay, go watch it. Every single drama, like they don't talk about it, right? Every single thing that happens with any teacher is happening in that story. Like, what did he really mean? Like I'm the best disciple, I'm the best student, and then the competition and the drama and blah, blah, all the jealousy. Spiritual communities are not are not devoid of humanity. Spiritual communities are just committed to becoming better humans, right? So just be gentle with your ACI friends. We're all just humans. We're just trying to be better humans. And then to be a better human, you have to sometimes make the mistakes, right? So be forgiving. But the Bodhisattva was like, look, I don't get it. Over here felt really comfortable. Here's what the world looks like. Here's a description of all the things in the world and a description of karma. And if I plant seeds and I do these things, things will change. Get it. Right. And then you went on this acid trip, and I believe you, Buddha. Like, you're a really cool guy. You know, Up until this point, nothing has been a problem. But then you get up here and you say nothing has any definitive nature of its own. Nothing exists. Right. I don't understand. Can you help me? Respectfully. Right. And then the Buddha says, oh, 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 oh. If you ever get that kind of noise, you're already screwed too. No, I don't mean it. But I mean, the Buddha's like, oh, no, don't worry. If I ever hear that from my teacher, don't worry, I already know that there's something totally wrong. I mean, it's true. Don't worry. Why? Because you can't do anything about it anyway right now because the seed's already out of the ground. You see? So because worry just creates more of the seeds. That's what they mean. Don't worry. Don't worry. You know, don't worry, buddy. You know, I got an answer for you. And then he presents an answer. And so uh, there's three primary things that the Buddha said in this moment to kind of outlay what is meant by what he meant. Oh, it's like, oh, what? Oh, like, oh, Bodhisattva. I'm sorry. Like, you have to interpret what I meant. What I really meant was three things. And he gave a teaching. And the three things are, and I'm sorry, this is in English. So interpreters, you'll have to change this. And I know it might be eventually translated. I don't like putting words in PowerPoints, but sometimes we need them. He meant there were three things. The Buddha said, look, what I really meant is that there's three things. That some things lack a definitive nature. Right? When I said that no existing thing had any nature of their own, what I meant were three different things. So when I was up there on Vulture's Peak on my acid trip, right? I'm looking out at my balcony right now, and like it looks over all of Rimrock, and I'm like, oh, that'd be a great place, like to teach the Diamond Cutter Sutra, right? Like to go on a little like Buddha acid trip and be like, nothing exists, nothing, no existing object has any nature of its own. I'm gonna announce it out to Rimrock, right? I'll go out after class and announce it, right? And then to the Bodhisattva, he said, well, actually, what I meant were three different lacks, right? There's three different lacks of nature. Lack when I meant that no existing object has any nature of its own. And now, interpreters, I'm sorry, it's going to get difficult. So breathe. So the three of them are first, is that I meant that there's a lack of any definitive nature. We're going to define these in a moment. Relax. Okay. Secondly, is that there's a lack of any nature of growing. Okay. And then thirdly, there's a lack of any nature of being ultimate. Okay. And so when I said no existing object has any nature of its own, what I meant was some things don't have a nature of their own. Okay. And so there's three different ways that any existing object doesn't have any nature of its own. Okay. So this is going to get highly technical. All right. So I give you, I'm going to give you a bunch of, this is going to rack your brain. If you've been with the mixed nuts and you've been studying mind only, it may not be so difficult to grasp, but going at it at this speed and going at it at this level will help clarify what emptiness is and what emptiness is not. To understand what it is that you have to deny when you're denying the existence of something, you have to be able to define what an existing thing would be in order for you to deny that it's existing. If you can't define it, and Pabonka Rinpoche is going on a total trip about this, which we'll talk about in an hour in Living Lam Rim, surprise that there's an overlap. Okay. But if you can define what emptiness is empty of, right? When you look at an object that you think exists, what is it actually empty of, right? And and the mind only school, which is not the correct one, or maybe it is, right? We're going to figure it out. How is this going to help us understand emptiness? How is this going to help us understand what we're actually trying to do when we're trying to perceive emptiness? We're trying to have that direct perception. When we're trying to have that moment where you finally understand how things are, actually are, and whatever that means, right? So the Buddha said, look, well, there's three, actually, what I meant were there's three different ways that something doesn't have a nature of its own, right? There's a lack of definitive nature, a lack of growing, and a lack of being ultimate, right? So now we need to understand, what do each of those three things mean? Okay. So so the first thing he talked about, he called them kuntak. All right. This is a great word to learn. So in the mind only school, in the Buddha's answer to the Bodhisattva, he gave three different lacks, right? Kuntak, right, is the first one. All right. And what does this mean? Right? There's different. I'm gonna go into each of these. We're gonna sort of list them all out first, and then we're gonna start building what each of them is. Okay. So this is a really good time to be very galupa, to be very galuk in your work, and write the three down, right? And they actually relate to these three in order. Okay. Did it on purpose. Okay. So you have three things: a lack of definitive nature, a lack of nature of growing, and a lack of any nature of being ultimate. So when we're trying to understand what emptiness is empty of, when we're trying to understand that what we're perceiving has emptiness, you know, this coffee cup, which is actually just water, you know, has three different lacks of any nature. There's no definitive nature, it lacks growing, and it lacks being ultimate. Any nature of being ultimate. Okay. So the first one is called a kuntak, right? A lack of any definite, the lack of any definitive nature is a kuntak. These are words that it's really, really nice to use the Tibetan words here, right? Because it's a new word for us. And it's sometimes nice to put new words to new concepts instead of trying to put them to other concepts that you might already know. Okay. And then the second one is called a shengwang. All right. A lack of any nature of growing. Okay. And and then the third one is called Yongdrup. A lack of any nature of being ultimate. Okay. So those are the three: Kuntaks, Shengwangs, and Yongdrups. Okay. Now, what do we mean? So let's go back to, oops, let's go back here to Kuntaks. It's actually pronounced Kuntak. That sa at the end is not pronounced. Okay, kuntak. But sometimes I will pluralize it because I'm pluralizing it in English, like multiple kuntaks, right? Or kuntak, 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 right? But that's not how you pluralize it in Tibetan, just for you nerds out there. So we call these constructs. Okay. A lack of any definitive nature. So, what do we mean by this? Right? What do we mean by a construct? And think of it this way as the words or mental images that you use to perceive the world. Okay. Right. Like when I hold up this object, right? I looked at this object here. Well, let me stop sharing my screen. Okay. When I hold up this object, right? Right. You get some kind of mental image, right? Something like, or a word, right? Pen, B, boligrafo. What other languages are there? Like there's, how many languages do we have here, right? One, two, three, four, five, six. Well, one, two, three, four, five, six, eight languages, right? There are eight different words for the people here, right? The image pen, right? It's a construct. The word pen is a construct, right? It's something that you can kind of call it imaginary, but we have to be careful, because you're not imagining a pen. It's not a fake pen. It's not something that's not there, right? But the image that you have in your mind, the word that you use, right? All a construct, right? An easy proof of that is, all right, get it? Get it? So there's something that it lacks any definitive nature. Like, so what that means is when the Buddha said, oh, what I really meant was that things lack a definitive when I say nothing exists from its own side. In one way, I meant that things lack a definitive nature because it's a construct of only names and terms. And so it can't exist from its own side through some unique nature of its own. It's not uniquely a pen from its own side because it doesn't announce itself and go, hi, I'm a pen, right? Because if it announced itself as a pen, dogs would write love letters to their doggy partners. You have the nicest butt. When I come to the dog park and smell your butt, you're the sweetest, whatever, right? Well, that's what dogs do, right? So, but a dog doesn't see this at the dog park and say, I'm going to write a love letter, right? The dog says, oh my God, I pick that up and run around and chew on it. Pick it up, run around and chew on it, right? And then plays with all their doggy friends. And then, they have a stick like this and the other dog's like this and they're running together. right? So the name in term is a construct. So when I said nothing exists from its own side, or nothing has any nature of its own, what I meant was that it lacks a definitive nature. Because you're doing this kun talking all the time. You are constructing all the time. Like, I can see every single one of you has a name. Like, oh, boy, girl, neither, both, right? Like, human, dog, pen, cup, chess piece, right? You're kun talking all the time, right? Because those objects don't announce themselves from their own side. They don't say, hey, they're not saying I exist through some unique nature of my own. All right. That should be really comfortable for you in general, right? That's not that much different than what we've talked about, especially in the upper middle way. It's somewhat different. Okay. But you have to understand in the mind only school, Kuntak is the only thing that lacks a definitive nature. We still haven't talked about Shengwangs and Yongdrups. Okay. So when we're thinking about Kuntaks, constructs, names, form, names and terms, images, right? We're talking about a certain aspect of an existing object. It doesn't announce pen from its own side. It doesn't announce, I don't even announce Tim from my own side, right? There are 90 people here, including myself. So 91, right? Which am I Tim from my own side? Like, but what does Tim as a name or a construct mean to each of you? Right. And to each of you, I'm different. I'm not Tim. There's no there's not 90, there's not 92 Tims here. I mean, there are 92 Tims. There's not one. You know, each of you is having your own unique experience of Tim, including me. Right. No one understands me because they can't understand me. All 91 of you don't understand me. It's so lonely in here. I'll never be fully understood. How's that sound? Right. And then how often do I go, I understand you. I get you. Right. Like, no, like it's just a construct and all the stuff that comes along with constructs, right? Your feelings, your perceptions, your judgments, all constructs, right? But that's just 1/3 of the things we have to study in the mind only school, right? And we're starting with constructs because it's the most comfortable, I think, because it's like, it's not so far from like everything's a mental image being projected on, some parts, right? Which is lower middle way, mainly, you know. But when you think about it and you spend the time and you meditate on this, you might understand how this is very useful for you, right? Because as Pavonka Rinpoche is going to say in about an hour and a half, he's going to say, if you can't properly understand how to establish the way that you think something is there, if you're not able to really understand in your own experience, not intellectually, but in your own experience, how something is there, first, You're never going to be able to negate it properly and see emptiness directly. But the karmic result of it, if you do it improperly, is that you tend toward the extreme of nihilism, that nothing exists at all. It's harsh. He says, it's really harsh. He says, if you're not able to do it in your direct experience, but just think you're an intellectual master of it, the karmic result will be nihilism, where nothing has any meaning at all. Oh, that is rough. And you can have to think about why. But that's why the Buddha was like, let's take our time. Let's go through the three aspects of the mind only school. What I meant was nothing has any definitive nature. What do you mean by that? What I mean is that they're kuntaks, right? Constructs. You put pen on this, you put cup on this, right? Dog puts chew toy, you know, nice person, bad person, like Buddha, not Buddha. Kuntak. Is your teacher a Buddha? That's your kuntak speaking. Are they existing from their own side as a Buddha? Or are they just some normal dude hanging out on Zoom at 7:13 in the morning, drinking his water? Right? I don't know. That's your kuntak, not my problem. Right? Or whomever your teacher is. I'm using myself as an example because I'm teaching. But like whomever your teacher is, like who do you see that way? It's just a kuntak. And your kuntak will change over time, right? Hopefully for the better, sometimes for the worse. Sometimes, then we say, oh my God, my teacher is like behaving this way and hurting me or help me. Like, my teacher is behaving, my teacher is helping, my teacher is this, my teacher is that. You're kuntaking all the kuntaking time. That's a good line, Anastasia. You're kuntaking all the kuntaking time. Save that one. Right. And then you think they're out there by themselves behaving that way. And you didn't even see that you were kuntaking. Right. But that's the trick. The work, right? Is to catch your kuntaks. Right. All right. Right. So, and I don't want to go to the middle way school too much yet because I want us to be mind only people. Like we want, it's similar, Louisa. It's very similar. So, but in the mind only school, Louisa, is that when you look, an object lacks a definitive nature in the middle way school. When you look for that object independent of its mental label or name, when you look for an object that's independent of its name or label and you can't find it, that's the middle way school. And there is a subtle difference between the two. And we'll talk about it much later. And I only said it because it's part of the homework answer, just so I said the word so you can do your homework. Eventually, right? Eventually you'll do your homework. but we're wearing our mind only hats. So kind of try to leave the middle way out for now. Okay. So we're talking about three different ways that things have a lack of a nature of their own. The first one is easy, constructs, kuntaks. They lack a definitive nature, right? And what does that mean? Well, they lack, they're only names, constructs of names and terms, words and mental images, right? Now, let's go back to Shengwang's, right? Here's the second one. We're never going to get this. Okay. The second aspect of the three, Shengwang, they are a little bit different here. And some of the ways we describe this, Shengwang can be translated as dependent things. They could be described as, sometimes we call them dominated things. But what we mean is that things depend upon other things. Changing things come from causes and conditions. All right. And we're going to go deeper into what this is in a later class. So if you don't understand everything today, it's okay. Part of the presentation is designed. It's okay, Ute, right? It's okay, right? If you don't understand it all today, it's okay. Just take the notes and start like chewing on it, okay? Because what you're gonna get to is you're gonna get to understand the ways that you are actually perceiving things incorrectly, even when you're trying to understand how things are coming from you. Right. So we're trying to break the mind, basically, right? We're trying to dissolve samsara. We're trying to dissolve our perception that things are out there by themselves, independent of us. Right. And thinking is not enough. Thinking is a start, but your perceptions aren't thinking, are not analysis. How about that?
Yeah, there was a group of Stefan and Seva and some other people that was all over the way over here where we were. Mm-hmm.
So, dependent things. When the Buddha said, right? When the Buddha said, things don't have any nature of their own, like I'm dramatizing, right? Get it, right? I'm dramatizing, right? What I meant was, when things don't have any nature of their own, first I meant kuntaks, but then I meant shengwangs, right? Dependent things, dominated things, changing things, things that come from causes and conditions. Those things do not grow by themselves. They have no nature of growing because they don't grow themselves. They grow rather by virtue of other factors, other things. They are dominated things. They are dominated by other things. They are dependent upon other things. Right. So when I said things have no nature of growing, what I meant was things don't have a nature of growing by themselves, but they depend upon other things. Okay. So now we have two ideas here. We have constructs, names and labels, names and mental images. Okay. And now we have shengwangs, which are dependent things. things that come from causes and conditions. What's the Shengwang aspect of this object? Not talking about constructs. We're not talking about pen. We're not talking about the word pen. Okay. We're talking about the Shengwang part, the dependent part, right? The thing that comes from causes and conditions, other factors, things that make this become a pen. Okay. We're going to go into a little bit deeper. But this is how, think about this is how you think, right? There's a stick here, right? Right. It has some parts, right? It got put together. It has some materials, right? Probably some aluminum, has some ink, right? Those are all constructs as words, right? But there's some things here that depend upon causes and conditions, right? And eventually this stick, whether it's a chew toy or a pen or all those other things it could be, like it's subject to causes and conditions. And so if I leave this sitting here in the Arizona sun outside on the porch, maybe we'll start calling the porch Vulture's Peak. That'll be fun. There's that. Actually, we have vultures. I have vulture. They're not vultures. They're crows. We'll call it Crow's Peak. I don't know. Right. But if you leave it out there, like the furniture I have out there, right? The paint on the deck, right? The wood, right? Those aren't subject to my kuntaks, right? The like the actual plank, the chair, right? Without the kuntak part. Those are all constructs. But the wood out there is hanging out there by itself on its own, kind of, right? But it doesn't have a nature of growing by itself. Like it just didn't appear there, right? Peacock Peak. I kind of like that. That's nice. I bought some peacock food the other day, by the way. So now he's really gonna love me. Um, but out there, like that wood is eventually gonna have to be replaced. It's 30 years old. I'm looking at it like, yeah, we're gonna have to replace this in about 5 years, or we're gonna be falling through, and we're not gonna have a peacock peak, right? We're gonna have a big hole under the ground and get hurt, right? But the sun, the heat, you know, the outer factors. There's other factors. There that wood is not did not grow there by itself. The wood was part of a tree, and then the tree was out, and the wood was out there, and then there was sun, and then there was water, and then there were animals living in it, and then someone cut it down and then turned it into a plank, right? The words are the constructs. Okay, you have to separate it, right? Separate all those words I used, the wood out there, the water, the sun, the leaves, right? The machines and all the things that turned it into the deck, right? The words, constructs. But those things themselves don't grow by themselves, right? They're determined by other factors. Okay. Causes and conditions, right? Dominated by causes and conditions, right? Your mind wants to go, Tim, but those things are coming from seeds too. Yes. Shut up. Okay. Yes, but we're not talking about that right now. We're trying to describe how it is what the Buddha really meant. And the Buddha really meant, well, Mr. Bodhisattva, what I really meant was constructs lack any definitive nature. Get it, right? things lack a nature of growing, right? Because they're caused and they have causes and conditions. So then the third one, okay, which was a lack of any nature of being ultimate, is what we mean by the word that we use in the mind only school is totality. Okay. Which means it means emptiness, but it has a very specific meaning of emptiness. And it's a lack of self-existence. It's a particular non-existing form of constructs that applies to all shengwangs, that applies to all objects, applies to all dependent things. Okay. So emptiness in the mind only school is a lack of all constructs that get applied to all dependent things. Okay. So we have three aspects. We have constructs, kuntaks. We have shengwangs, changing things, dependent things. Third thing we have is totality, emptiness. Things have a lack of being ultimate, right? But what do we mean by that? And it comes out in a very, very beautiful way. And then we'll end class here, right here. Okay. All objects have these three qualities. Every existing thing has these three qualities. All right. So you start with your shengwangs, your dependent things. Okay. We haven't quite established what it is, but just try to imagine. And then we subtract the kuntak. Okay. The subtraction should be on the other side. I'm sorry. Sorry. I went dyslexic on this. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Let's go back to that. Okay, so shengwangs, dependent things. Oops, wait, gotta share the screen, silly. A shengwang minus a kuntak. Dependent things, dominated things, minus their construct, minus cup, the word cup, the image cup, okay, equals Yongdrup. Take a screenshot of this, everybody. And then I'm going to have you meditate on it. Okay. So the English slide looks like this. Dependent things. By the way, you can't experience dependent things directly. You experience dependent things through the construct. Okay. That's what you have to wrap your head around. You don't experience dependent things directly. You're always experiencing them through your kuntaks, through your kuntaking. So kuntakingly difficult. Okay. So when you take away your construct from those dependent things, that's how you get to totality. That's how you get to emptiness in the mind only school. That's what emptiness is. Okay. So think about this as a kind of an equation, right? Dependent things minus their constructs is the totality. Shengwangs minus the kuntak is the young drup, is the emptiness. Okay. So there you go. Now you're really smart. Okay. No, but really take that and think about it. You know, you're not supposed to understand it yet. And that's okay. But when the Bodhisattva went up to the Buddha and said, "Look, you told us everything exists has a definitive nature, and then you got on Vulture's Peak and were like, nothing has any nature of its own. Were you on some kind of acid trip, or were you lying?" And the Buddha said, "Well, no. What I really meant was by that, I meant that there's three different meanings to nothing doesn't have any nature of its own. It lacks a definitive nature. It doesn't have any nature of growing, and it doesn't have any nature of being ultimate." And then we have the three pieces, the kuntaks, the shengwangs, and the yongdrups that apply to those three lacks. Every existing thing has these three qualities, we'll call them. All those things there. What do you perceive? Well, you're perceiving kuntaks. But you start taking away your kuntaks, and then you can get closer to emptiness. And that sounds pretty damn cool. And it's not that far off. And it's extremely helpful. Yay. ACI 15, class 2. We made it. All right. We only had 90. We didn't reach 100 people today. I'm so sad. because that's meaningful, apparently, because numbers are arbitrary. Anyhow, thank you all for coming. Thank you for studying, and this can be the key, one of the keys to unlock emptiness for you. All right, cool. We'll take a half-hour break. We'll come back for 25 minutes, rather. Come back for Living Lamrim, where we'll study more about emptiness. Yay! So please say goodbye to each other, and see you shortly.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Team Love.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you, Tim. Goodbye, everyone.
Gracias.
See you soon.
Bye. Thank you. Danke.
Bye.
Wiedersehen.
Assalamualaikum.
Gracias.
谢谢，拜拜。
谢谢老师，谢谢翻译老师。
Maestro Tudor.
谢谢老师。Thank you. Bye bye.
And someone asked a
Thank
question.
you, team. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Someone asked a question. If you're staying for Living Lamrim, it's on this link. You don't have to go anywhere. You can just go and
Gracias.
take a break.
Gracias.
All right. See you guys in a short bit. Thank you.